All right. Well, we technically are in the under 65 open enrollment season. This is the first ADT session that we've hosted during the 2025 OEP season. I've got a lot of stuff that I want to go over with you today, and I'm happy to answer questions along the way too. There's just a lot of different updates and things. So I'm hopeful that some of your peers that aren't able to make it today will at least be able to watch the recording. I'll try to send that out as well. Um, Wanted to start off though by just talking about in general what we're seeing across multiple markets. And I would say I personally believe that this is probably the most chaotic and volatile open enrollment season that we've seen in a lot of years, maybe ever. As we've begun to run rates and things across the board, we are seeing the rate increases that we knew were coming. Um, we are seeing the disruption in the markets with carriers pulling plans or pulling out. And we're also seeing the impact of the enhanced federal subsidies not being intact. Now, I want to clarify that because I had a few questions yesterday about this. Um, this government shutdown and what's going on when it comes to ACA subsidies is not impacting all subsidies. I had a couple agents say, well, I went in and ran some quotes and I still see government subsidies in there, so is something wrong? So when this law was passed in 2010, it began to be implemented in 2014. We're talking about the Affordable Care Act. And there was a baseline level of government subsidies that were a part of this legislation from the very beginning. Um, and it was a reduced amount from where we're at today. In 2021, the federal government during the COVID pandemic passed legislation to enhance the federal government subsidies that were available to people. Um, without without being political and just stating facts, it was 100% Democrats that passed this into law and then scheduled for it to end at the end of 2025. So there wasn't a single Republican that voted for that. And I will say, I think it was very helpful for many people, especially those people who were laid off by the pandemic. But it was literally tens of billions of dollars that was allocated in 2021. It was an extended, actually, it was started in 2021 for 1 year, and then in 2022 it was extended through 2025. Both completely partisan votes. I mean, it was one side that voted for all of it. Our clients and many of us have been the beneficiaries of this, though, for the last 4 years, because we have higher federal subsidies than we've ever seen, and that has helped to insulate many consumers against the realities that the rates are climbing precipitously on individual health insurance policies every single year. But it's insulated them. And, we've been at a point where people who were over 400% of the federal poverty level were getting significant subsidies. I mean, I had clients with families making 120, 130, even $150,000 a year getting government assistance through these enhanced federal government subsidies. And so that's kind of the state that we've been in. Everybody knew that these subsidies were coming to an end at the end of 2025. This isn't a surprise. It's been that way since 2022 when they extended them. But typical government fashion, nobody's done anything until the final hour here. And now we're in this quagmire where they have shut down the federal government. And a large part of the reason the government's shut down is because the Democrats want to extend these federal government subsidies in addition to some other things. And the Republicans don't want that to happen or don't think that's a good usage of, federal tax dollars. So that's like the dilemma that we're in right now. And I don't know when this is going to end. I think at this point, we have to continue to work with our clients on the assumption that the enhanced federal subsidies are going away. Um, I will say I shared some things with my team on Friday. Just a few examples that I have run. There's a number of things that are impacting these families who are on individual health insurance plans today. I think people who are below 300% of the federal poverty level, they're still getting pretty significant government subsidies. And so while their premiums might be going up a little bit, and it might be a lot to them, we're not looking at, crazy increases there. There are some people who are like right at 400 to 420, 430% of the federal poverty level, who are being significantly impacted because not only do we have the rate increases that are actually happening on the base health insurance premium, but they're in some situations losing all government subsidies. And I have one example of a client who is paying, I think, under $450 a month right now with the government subsidy. The projection, if they keep that same plan going into next year, is over $1,200 for that same plan. And that's a combination of the rate going up by 26% and this federal subsidy falling completely away. So there are some people who are dealing with, I'll tell you, you probably don't want to hear my own story, but I don't qualify for a government subsidy. So if I keep the same plan, my premium's going from about $1,700 a month to about $2,400 a month for my family. We're talking like $700, $8,400 a year in increase. Um, and higher deductibles and out of pockets, right? So this is hitting some of us very personally. Um, the thing I think we've got to do though is we have to be the voice of reason in the calm and the storm. I've always said that this kind of chaos and volatility creates opportunities for those of us who have the guidance and the counsel to give. And I think we're in that place more than we've ever been before. People are struggling, but I think we can't fix all of this for people either. I think we've got to, be very, very direct with people about this is the reality that we're in. And candidly, maybe an ACA plan is not the right option for you any longer if you can't afford it. And the beauty of this is that we have creative alternatives that we can pivot to in just about every market that are less coverage than an ACA plan, but it's better than not that consumer caring nothing. I think we've just got to help them with something and get them to understand that something is better than nothing, right? If all you can afford is $150 or $200 a month, we can find something that would take some of that risk off of your shoulders. I've always explained it to clients that, if you're running with no insurance, you have 100% of the potential risk on your own shoulders. Buying insurance is simply the act of moving a portion of that insurance to someone else or to another entity, right? Very few people can afford to move 100% of the risk that they bear onto someone else. It's just too expensive. So we're always shifting a portion of that risk. Just because I can't shift 80 or 90%, or I can't afford the cost of shifting 80 or 90% of that risk to someone else, doesn't mean I should be responsible for 100% of the risk, right? If I can shift 30 or 40 or 50%, I think that puts a client in a better position. I also think, though, that as we pivot to these creative alternatives, we have to be very careful about setting the right expectations about what they will and they will not do. And I'm hopeful that we can spend a little bit of time on that before we wrap things up today, because I think that is important. And there's some forms and some cover our butt sheets that we have available in our arsenal to make sure that clients do understand if they're buying a lesser plan, where those gaps and holes might exist, and really signing off that they're comfortable with that in return for the lower monthly premium. So I do think these conversations are taking longer than they have in past years because it's not just a matter of let's recalibrate your subsidy and re-enroll you in the same plan. In some situations, it's like, okay, we need to pivot to a different kind of insurance to be able to hit the budget constraints that you may have, right? So these are just realities that we're dealing with. I got a number of things that I did want to touch on just kind of ad hoc this morning. First of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about live transfers. If you're a new agent or if you're in a position that you have the bandwidth to be able to take live transfers, I do feel like consumers are panicking a bit right now. We do have, I'd heard some rumors that people were questioning what the volume of live transfers was coming through. I know I pulled some data here and pulled some things from our TVP call this morning that I just wanted to share. So this is specific to Medicare, and I know all of you are not in Medicare, but you can see that yesterday we had almost 1,500 total Medicare live transfers come in. In our area, we had about 29 and we took 28 of them. So really great work there on the branded. And then on the affiliate, which are third party live transfers, it looks like we had about 15 come in and we took about 13. A couple of things that I will point out. If you're working in multiple states, nationwide, we only took about 65% of the branded Medicare live transfers that came in yesterday. So there were about 433 that went to an inbound inquiry and were distributed out to an agent that way. If we look at the affiliate, we only took about 39%. Now, we talked about this on our TVP call this morning, and the thing that I believe this is being driven by is most agents who have a large book of business, we're being, through the state of what's going on, we're being required to go back and touch every single one of those clients and really have a robust conversation with them. So a lot of our, top agents in the country just don't have the bandwidth to be able to deal with that right now. I'd also point out here, so these are affiliate live transfers, both Medicare and health. So depending on which side you're on, but you can see some of the states that are in red have very, very low taken rates on some leads. So if you're licensed in some of those states, I was kind of intrigued to see that a Medicare affiliate, we only took about 26% of what was available yesterday in Indiana. So I will say branded leads, branded health markets leads are usually a little bit higher quality The affiliate leads are the third party leads, and both in the under 65 ACA market and the over 65 Medicare market, those are viable leads to take. They're a little bit lower closing percentage, but they are people who are actively looking for something. And so if you've got the bandwidth, you're a new agent, take some time and look at that, look at those. So I just wanted to kind of provide you with some of that data. A couple of other just thoughts on your live transfers. If you're not able to take the live transfers, I would ask that you flip the toggle switch to shut them off during the time that you can't take them. We're seeing some agents leaving their leads on 24/7, and that's fine if you want to work 24/7. The problem, though, is as you set up those lead orders, you're creating demand in the system that Health Markets is spending money to fill. And so if you're not in a position to take leads, just toggle them off so that we can divert those monies somewhere else into a market where people are actively wanting to work those leads. So that would just be one ask that I would have. Now, I'm not saying that just because you can't take a lead. I mean, there are times during the day the live transfer comes in and you can't take it, and you would have if you could have, but that's okay. That's okay. But if like you're sleeping at night, I wouldn't have your live transfers on during that time because that's creating artificial demand, over an extended period of time. So, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything about live transfers that I could answer for you before we move to the next topic?
Nothing in the chat.
Cool. We'll keep rolling them. Probably today or tomorrow, we're going to be rolling out what is called our OEP tracker. So we have a final tracker that we use during this busy season to track our ACA sales. And so Rachel's going to be working on that today. We'll be getting it out. And I just wanted to kind of recap the trackers that we have that we ask for everybody who's on the team to participate in. We have our standard Jessup agency call-in. That particular document is managed. Well, actually, all of them are managed by Rachel, and the Jessup agency call-in is something that we do 52 weeks a year. And what it's designed to do is it's designed to allow you to input the business that you wrote in each line of business, so that we can see some sort of a tally of what's going on throughout the agency. I'm going to pull it up here just so I can give you guys a quick reminder of these call-ins because they are kind of important, especially as we move into this week and beyond. We really got to have line of sight into what's going on so we can report this to our carrier partners. So this is what's called the 2025 Jessup Agency Call-In. You can see it up here in the corner. And if you don't have access to it, reach out to Rachel. But the idea with this is that you put in the annual volume, the monthly premium times 12 for each product that you sell into the turquoise columns. And then it calculates your FYCRs by product line. And then it gives you a total FYCR total out here on the left-hand side.
Can you make it a wee bit bigger?
Sure. So you don't see the whole screen, but I'm up in the right-hand corner now, and you can see we're in week 36 down here at the bottom, and the dates 10/31 to 11/6 are here too. So you're making sure you're putting the information in. What happens is every late Friday morning every week, Rachel locks this down, so you can't enter new numbers, and then we start putting numbers into the next week, which would be week 37, which is next week. So we just kind of work through these tabs. The idea is, whatever you're selling, let's say you sold an HBG product. What you do is you take the monthly premium on that times 12, because that's the annual volume, and you plug that number in here, and then the FYCRs all calculate for you. If you scroll down, you can see all of our sales teams are here. So here's Derek's sales team, here's Gary's sales team, and then Tyler's sales teams at the bottom. And then it kind of keeps a running tally. This also allows you to see what you're doing as compared to your peers each week. I will tell you that if somebody, this is one of like the most basic things that I ask agents to do is just report your numbers each week. Even if it's a zero, put in zeros in each column to show your participation and so that everything calculates appropriately. I do try to poke agents and remind them on Friday mornings if they haven't done this yet, but I just ask if you please make this a priority, set a reminder, set an alarm, whatever you need to do to remind yourself. And what we're doing is on Friday morning, Thursday night or Friday morning, we're reporting the sales we've made for the previous 7 days. So we start fresh every Friday morning, Friday through Thursday night. We tally those numbers and we plug them into the trackers. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Rachel or your sales leader. They can help you better understand this. If you're brand new and your name's not on here yet, just reach out to Rachel. She'll put your name on here and share it with you. But this is a pretty important thing that I ask everybody to keep an eye on. The other thing is that as you scroll through this, you can see who's having big weeks. Looks like McIntyre's already over 23,000 FYCRs for the single week. Cheryl's over 12,000. So you can kind of see where agents are lining up. Boverhoff's over 8,500, 8,600. So a lot of agents update this throughout the week, or you can update it all on Thursday night or early Friday morning. I don't care how you do that. It's up to you, but we just ask for your help on that. The other tracker that we have out there is the AEP tracker. Here's the 2026 Medicare tracker. And this is broken down into weeks as well. We're currently in week 4 down here. And this is where we enter all of our Medicare sales, including over on the far right-hand side, our senior ancillary products. That's a separate column where we put those in. I do want to just point out very quickly, this is the main screen, and what this main page does is it tallies all the weeks. So there's 3.5 weeks worth of data in here for whatever agents have input. I will say there's some incredibly crazy numbers that are being written. Ray Plagan's at 246 Medicare Advantage. I'll zoom in, Sandra, sorry. So these are the columns, and these are just pulling from the other tabs to kind of build this out. So Cavajola is at 186. Looks like Laura Dennison has 34 senior ancillary, so that's really great. Letcher's at 35. I said Ray was at 246. Look at McIntyre here. 123 Medicare Advantage plans, 145 total ancillary products. Ray's over 77. Angie and Ryan are 48. Derek's at 64 senior ancillary products and 120 here. So looks like Gary's got 66 changes here. Dick's doing well. Tyler's at 71 and 19. So that's really great. And then Joel's doing a great job, 22 total ancillary. So it is interesting to see what we've done as a territory team so far. 2,700 total Medicare Advantage enrollments, 653 new senior ancillary products. And this is what, in the first 3 weeks? So really fun to see what's going on there. So we're going to then share with you a little bit later this week the third tracker, which is for the under 65 market. If you're not operating in the Medicare space, you don't need to fill out the Medicare tracker, right? So if you're just getting started, you just have the Jessup agency call in, and then you'd have the under 65 tracker. And all we're tracking on that is new ACA applications. So we'll get that out to you and make sure that's updated. Our first turn on for that will be on Thursday night or Friday morning this week. So I just want to take some time to go over that because I know that can kind of be confusing, just to make sure you guys understand kind of what's going on. Are there any questions about any of the trackers? Oh, I'll also mention that each tracker also has a how-to tab at the bottom. So if you have questions, I'd say check out that how-to tab because I've tried to build that out in a way that it kind of gives you at least an idea of what you need to be inputting there and how to input them. And then if you have questions, let Rachel or I or your sales leader know. Any questions? Cool. Okay, I had sent out a bunch of emails yesterday, and I just wanted to make sure you guys had a chance to review them. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but I thought they were important enough that I wanted to mention them. Um, I think it's important as you're working with consumers in the under 65 space to understand what income you need to use. And I would say it's important to know that it's their modified adjusted gross income. Or MAGI. That's the number that we have to work off of. One of the questions that had come up was around Social Security benefits. There's talk, and I think part of the big beautiful bill is that some Social Security benefits next year may not be taxed. I think there's even situations today where some Social Security benefits are not taxed. So some people will say, well, I don't need to add that in because I'm not taxed on that. Well, the reality is, and this is directly from healthcare.gov, is that you take your adjusted gross income and add any untaxed foreign income, non-taxable Social Security benefits, and tax-exempt interest. So even if you're not taxed on Social Security, that goes into the modified adjusted gross income that you need to input on your ACA application. And that will then determine what kind of a subsidy you're eligible for. So I wanted to make sure you guys understood that. Any questions about that? You're going to slow me down if we have questions, right, Sandra?
Yep.
Cool. I'm not going to zoom in on this because you guys can look at it in your own email, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood that if you sell a health protector guard to somebody who's 60 to 64 years old, the commission is less. It's about it's a little more than a third of what the commission is for 18 through 59-year-olds. So I just didn't want that to surprise you. That was something I was not aware of until somebody pointed it out to me, but it is very real. It's on the commission table on the resource center and in the email I sent you. I also wanted to remind you that there's times when you will port out from VanillaSoft to quote somebody in Quote Connect. And in some situations, when you do that, we're seeing it duplicate certain household members and then everybody's grayed out. So you can't see or you can't change anything. Derek Mabry taught me yesterday that to fix that in Quote Connect so you can move forward with your quoting and enrollment process, all you need to do is click on this unlink button by the last name, and that will ungray everything and unlink that particular quote to what you brought over from VanillaSoft. And then you can manipulate these. You can add some or delete them or change them or whatever you need to get the family demographic correct before you actually move into the quoting and enrollment process. So we're working on trying to figure out why duplicates are even being created. So I understand that's the root of the problem here, but this is the workaround and the fix for it. Any questions about that?
No, but I'm definitely going to try that.
Yeah, it works for sure. And I knew it did. I just forgotten it. I feel like I've forgotten
Mhm.
more about this business than I remember at this point. So, but yeah, Derek was great about bringing us up to speed on that. Um, all right. I want to talk a
Can you
little bit.
discuss, I'm sorry, will you be discussing the new consumer consent requirements for under 65?
Perfect lead in. I was going to say I'm going to pivot now to talking about ACA consent forms. So
Woohoo!
I'm looking to get a corporate legal clarification on a number of questions. We just talked about this on the call this morning. I think the government has changed things a little bit, and I just want to make sure that we're doing this compliantly. So, Health Markets is in the process of finalizing a Health Markets version of the consent forms that we can use independent of anything else if we want to or need to. So, I want to give you some context here. So, several years ago, we have not always had these ACA consent forms. They have not been needed. I think it was what, Sandra, 2 or 3 years ago that they started forcing
Yes.
an ACA consent form.
Yeah, when people started getting taken advantage of.
Yep. So they did this to curb unethical agents from just stealing clients and enrolling people in things that they didn't even know they were enrolled in. And I'll tell you, there was a whole segment of our industry that did this. They wouldn't even talk to a consumer. They would just go into healthcare.gov, look up that person's information, adjust their income, take over the agent of record and become their agent. Maybe sometimes even enroll them in a plan they didn't know they were enrolled in. There were a lot of situations and pockets across the country where there were zero premium plans available, so it didn't cost anything, so they never needed to collect money, but they could generate a revenue stream. These nefarious agents could generate a revenue stream by just enrolling all these random people in $0 premium plans. And
Yeah,
they were
it
still
was so bad that they were even going in and falsifying, saying that these people recently lost Medicaid to create a special enrollment period.
so that was kind of the catalyst for ACA consent forms in general. When these ACA consent forms came out, the government said you need one ACA consent form to access the application, and then you need another consent form at the end of the conversation before you execute the enrollment to verify that the information is accurate and true and that this is the plan they want to enroll in. Health Market's legal team looked at that and said they got comfortable with one ACA consent form, and it was a combination of the two. And so that's what we've been using. If you've been using whatever's in our e-signature platform on the Resource Center through the Adobe Acrobat e-sign, or if you do it through Quote Connect, like if you send it from Quote Connect, that particular document has always been kind of a combo ACA consent form. Well, about 10 days ago, I guess CMS issued some new guidance on that. And so our legal team said we've really got to get two consent forms anymore. So Health Markets is in the process of rolling out those two consent forms and building them in a way that you can put two agents' names on them. So a sponsor agent and a sub agent would be a scenario where that might make sense, or a sponsor agent and an assistant, a licensed assistant. Maybe they want both their names on that. So that they are opening that up a little bit so that there can be two agents' names on that single consent form. Um, I'll tell you what my team and I have kind of decided to do is we've decided to not wait on health markets to develop that, but just use the consent forms that are a part of the Health Sherpa workflow already. And there are two that are in there. One is when you go to access somebody's application, there's just a pop-up screen says, "Do you have consent?" And if you don't, you can send an email or a text to the consumer and get them to sign it to give you consent to access the application. And my understanding right now is that we're supposed to have that every time we access someone's application on healthcare.gov. Now, I have some questions that I've submitted, which I'll tell you what they are here in a moment. But um, then there's a secondary consent at the very end once you've consummated the deal and everything, where you can text it or email it to them, and it's basically them saying, "Yeah, this is what I want to do," and it really is a cover your butt sheet. You're supposed to have that done before you hit the or pull the eligibility summary and then hit enroll in in the plan. Um, so we're going to be using it inside of Health Sherpa because it's a very simple workflow and it's part of the workflow for the enrollment we'd use anyway. I would say there are some questions that have come up. One is that sometimes consumers struggle with technology on their end. So Justin Wired asked, if are we able to record, like if somebody can't get the text or the email or can't figure it out, can we get on a recorded line and just record verbally reading the ACA consent form and then them agreeing to it? I would guess that we can, but I'm getting some clarity from guidance from legal on that. Um, I think there's some other questions too, like how long is consent good for? In the beginning, we were under the impression that when you got a consent form, it was kind of until it was revoked, it was good, right? And
Mhm.
then CMS started like updating things and saying, well, no, every time that you make a plan change, you've got to have a new consent form. So the consent form is good until a new plan change is executed. And then most recently, it appears that they've come back and said, well, every time you actually access an application on behalf of a consumer, you need a consent form. And so the question that I asked our legal team is, so let's say I get a consent like now, we access their application a few times. We're back and forth on what we're going to do, and we finally make a selection and decide we're going to go enroll on December 14th, right before the end of the deadline. Like every time I'm going in and working on it, do I need a separate consent, or does one consent like cover me for a period of time? So I'm just trying to get some clarity on that, and exactly when, not only how long is it good for, but when is a new one required? Uh,
Mhm.
I'd say it's a little loosey goosey right now, and I don't mean that in a bad way. But I'm just telling you, don't live in fear that you're going to go to jail because you don't have the right consent form. I would say make sure you have a consent form, right?
Mhm.
The one that Health Markets has or whatever's in Health Sherpa, I think are good right now. We'll get some, additional clarity
Yeah.
around
One of
exactly
the
how.
one of the things that I had asked you yesterday was related to I already had their consent through, say, the e-signature platform, the old version. And I think as long as we have some, because it's dated, right? It's dated before the time they made this change and going back to two forms. So I'm not worried about that at all. In fact, I know in one of the questions here was, has the ACA consent form been updated on Health Sherpa? The one that you will see there for the initial consent is the updated one. So for the initial consent only.
The other thing that I think you would be legal doing right now is using the one that's in the e-signature platform initially, like
Hmm.
go to Senate and get that one signed, and then just before you execute the enrollment, do the confirmation one inside of Health Sherpa. It's two
Yeah, you
different
could.
platforms, but I don't think I think you're still like
The language is still there in that initial one with the e-sign. It's
right,
just that it also embeds the enrollment part. So
right.
just double back on the enrollment part and send the second one. There's some other questions, Silas.
I've got them here. So Maggie, you asked about the text version of the initial consent not working through Health Sherpa. That was actually reported yesterday by Justin Wired or 2 days ago, and I have escalated that. I did get it to work through mine, so it seems to be sporadic. But yeah, I'll work on that and see what's going on with Health Sherpa on that. Um, So Emily said, when I went through the marketplace training, I took away from it that the consent was still in place until revoked, still proceeding with every time, but I think the marketplace indicated otherwise. I agree with you. I've also saw that as I went through the FFM certification, but health markets and carriers are doing semi-sporadic audits and asking for stuff. And we actually had an agent who um, didn't pass the audit because the auditor said, well, you're supposed to have a new consent each time you access the application. And while you had one in the past, you didn't have one for this instance. So I pushed back on that too and said, hold on. So I'm kind of just waiting, and I think legal is trying to figure out what is legit as well. Um, So Kemp said if we change someone's plan for 2026, are they auto disenrolled from their 2025 plan? Yes. So a new active re-enrollment by pushing an application through resets and gets rid of everything else that they had in place, as long as it was an on-exchange plan in the past, right? If they had short-term insurance or they had an off-exchange plan or they had a health protector guard or they had group insurance, like it's not going to override any of those and cancel any of those. But marketplace plan to marketplace plan inside the marketplace, it will override whatever the old one was. That makes sense, Kim? Cool. Good questions. Uh,
Mhm.
Sorry, I saw one more here. So Josh said I had a live transfer, was on Arizona Medicaid, but also signed up for a marketplace plan without their knowing, like you were talking about. Is it on us to report those?
Well, I tell you what, if it was a situation where I had also make a call to the marketplace, to find out what was going on, um, that's how that happened the last time. And actually, the marketplace rep said, "Do you want to report this?" Because the prior agent who did the nefarious act, their name's on the application. It's like, absolutely, because what ended up happening was they had disenrolled my client from their current plan and put them in a different plan that their providers weren't in network for or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it was a mess. But we got our client back on the correct plan. Now, this is a case where they have Medicaid, but how they got enrolled in a marketplace plan, I'd be making a phone call.
Yeah, so I think when you call in, think you can report those. You can also go above and beyond and report stuff to the Department of Insurance and the Attorney General, and there's forms and places you can go to do all that. I would say though that that's a lot of work, especially this
It
time
is a
of
lot
year.
of work. So
So
should they be on Medicaid or should they be on the marketplace plan?
I'd say if they're eligible, I mean, if they're on Medicaid, somebody's granted them Medicaid and they have Medicaid, and that's probably the harder of the two to get, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
would probably be getting rid of their marketplace plan as long as they're eligible for Medicaid, because they can't do both. And when you think about this, a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to be in Medicaid, I want to be in the marketplace plan. People are not eligible for federal government subsidies on a marketplace plan if they're eligible for Medicaid. And it makes sense if you think about it. Medicaid is a state program. Obamacare ACA is a federal program, and the feds say we're not going to help you buy or pay for your insurance if the state is willing to do so. So it goes to the state first, and then if the state's not willing to help them because they're high enough income, then that's when the feds will kick in and provide them with a government subsidy. So logically, it kind of makes sense. But I tell people, okay, well, you don't have to take Medicaid free, free insurance through Medicaid. You can go to a marketplace plan, but you're going to pay the full premium with no subsidy. People will short circuit for a minute and then they'll decide they just want to take Medicaid because it is quite expensive unsubsidized, obviously. Does that make sense? Okay. Stefan, I saw your question. So I think what your issue is, and I think I've sent this out a couple of times, but so if your client, if you're in Connecture and you're doing a Medicare enrollment and your client is not getting the code, what's happening is you don't have the client's cell phone number in the mobile phone field on the main screen of their profile in Connecture. It's an easy thing to overlook. Some of our sales leaders overlooked it. I've answered this question probably 20 times now, and it's okay. I'm not beating you up about it. I'm glad you're asking. But if you go to that client's profile, the main screen where all their information is in Connecture, and you look, there's a main like home number and then a mobile number field. You got to have their cell phone in that mobile number field for the system to be able to send out the code to be able to access their application. So when you do that application in Connecture, then you complete everything inside of Connecture and you send it to the beneficiary, email or text. They get a link, they click on the link, and then they've got to click, send a code to get the code. Well, if their mobile number is not in the mobile number field clear back at the beginning, there's no way for Connecture to send them that code or to know where to send that code. So that's been the problem. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have additional questions about it, let me know. Does that make sense, Stefan? Cool. I see the thumbs up. All right. So something else I just want to talk about a little bit because we don't spend a lot of time on this. So um, most of the ACA insurance carriers offer both on exchange and off exchange plans. On exchange simply means we're going through healthcare.gov to get them enrolled. And that is the only path that they can go down to get a federal government subsidy to help pay for their insurance premiums. Off exchange, many of the carriers, I feel like more carriers are offering off exchange plans this year than in previous years. Off exchange, they are still buying an ACA compliant plan that meets minimum essential coverage requirements, has all the essential health benefits. It's a very similar plan to what an on exchange plan would be. But many of the carriers are now offering these off exchange where a consumer can just buy them direct from the insurance company. I've personally been on an off exchange plan for a couple of years with Am Better. And the main reasons that I did that is number one, I didn't have to go through healthcare.gov and disclose a bunch of information. I could just buy it direct from the insurance company. The application was easier. And in many situations, those off exchange plans look a little different, might be a little more attractive, and also might be a little less premium as far as the raw premium is concerned. Now, if somebody goes off exchange, there's no chance of them getting a federal subsidy. So when you're talking about off exchange people, you're talking about people that number one, maybe high income, high net worth, and are never going to qualify for a government subsidy. You're talking about people who might be participating in an individual coverage health reimbursement arrangement or an ICRA through their employer, and their employer is giving them a stipend. And because they're getting that stipend from the employer, they're not eligible for a federal government subsidy off exchange. And that's why that's probably the number one reason why many of these carriers are now offering off exchange plans is because so many small companies are blowing up their group insurance and pushing their employees into ICRAs, individual coverage health reimbursement arrangements, where they give them a stipend to go buy an individual plan. And if they're getting that stipend from their employer, again, the government's not going to continue to subsidize them. So going off exchange makes logical sense for some of those folks. Um, I will say, as we kind of look at things across like Indiana here, Am Better on exchange has no bronze plans, but off exchange, they have bronze plans, which is kind of interesting. Um, I see that Anthem and CareSource here in Indiana also have off exchange products. In the past, it was kind of hard to get to those off exchange rates and plans because you had to do it through the carrier portal. What I'm recognizing now is that this year, if you go into Health Sherpa, there's a toggle at the top when you're looking at a consumer situation, and you can toggle between on exchange and off exchange. If somebody's like high income and now, but they don't know if their income is going to stay high for the year, some people, because you can, if you're on in an on exchange plan, you can either take the subsidy in the moment each month, which is probably the most typical thing for people to do, or you could pay the full premium all year and just settle up on that subsidy when you file your taxes at the end of the year. That's when everything washes out either direction anyway. And the IRS is kind of the enforcer on whether or not the income that you put in matches what the final number was when you filed your taxes. So I have had clients before where they're like, "Hey, I'm making a quarter million," and then we get to the end of the and we put them, but they don't know if they're going to stay at that income level for the year. And so we put them on an on exchange plan so that they have the capability of going back and getting that subsidy at a later date if their income drops for some reason, right? If a high income, high net worth person goes off exchange and their income drops mid-year, they can't go recover that subsidy on the backside. It's just they don't get any subsidy if they're off exchange no matter what. I think that's important to kind of understand too. Um, do you guys have questions about on exchange versus off exchange?
Silas, do they tend to be cheaper? Is that like, what is the benefit?
Sometimes they're a little bit cheaper. I'd say the benefit is it's easier application process. The consumer doesn't have to go through healthcare.gov as a clearinghouse for everything. It's just
Mm.
direct with the insurance company. Oftentimes they are 10, 12, 15 points cheaper. For a similar product. Sometimes the products are different, so it's hard to compare apples to apples. But, a high deductible, I mean, their cheapest plan might be less expensive off exchange than on exchange. Um, in the past, a lot of the carriers like mimic the plan, like the plan design was the same on and off exchange. This year, though, it's looking much different than that. It's like they have an on exchange offering and an off exchange offering, which are uniquely different product designs too. They're
I
all pretty
think
similar.
also, some of the off exchange plans in the past where they actually offered a PPO, a true PPO type of plan, whereas on the exchange it's just, you know, HMOs.
In EPO.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that could be also something. And then obviously if it's a little bit of a higher income level and they weren't getting much of a subsidy anyway, it might not be that big of a deal for them, but
Yeah.
And our
Well,
commissions, oh, I'm sorry, our commissions would be the same or similar? I
it's,
mean,
yeah,
okay.
per member
Yeah.
per month.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's a commission difference on those at all.
No, and there are HSA options off exchange.
So, Christy, you got an incredible question, which is one thing that gives me heartburn right now. So, she said if someone puts down a certain income and doesn't make that amount and should have gone to Medicaid, do they have to pay the full subsidy back? So, what she's talking about is somebody who overinflates their income for any number of reasons, maybe perfectly truthfully, and they get to the end of the year and they made far less than they'd reported. Are those government subsidies, do they need to be paid back? In the past, there was a safe harbor deal that prevented people from owing subsidies back if they made less money than they should have, and they should have been in Medicaid. But part of this government shutdown is around this right now. My understanding is the way it's structured today, like right now, according to the law, that yes, they could owe that money back. Now, I also think there's like the whole dilemma of how does the government collect money from somebody who's already pretty low income and made less than they anticipated, so they should have had free insurances. I mean, like, where are they going to go? How are they going to do that, right? So practical application of that seems problematic to me. But that's yes, there is a very real. That's the way it's lining up right now from a legislative perspective. I
Yeah,
got to believe that whenever whenever Congress gets back to work, that they'll figure that piece out and there will be something there because that doesn't make much logical
yeah.
sense.
When you think
I
about
just have a
even like your,
couple.
I was gonna say, when you
Sorry,
think about
Sandra.
yourself, when you think about your self-employed people and they're trying to forecast what their income's going to be next year, and you know, they don't really know if it's gonna be a good year or not. It makes it difficult.
Right.
Yeah, I have a couple customers right now who are just like scrambling, trying to figure out because they're not sure if they're going to be close to that. And so, but are not really wanting to go to Medicaid. And so it's just
Well,
kind of,
and
Well, and I
sometimes they
think
probably wouldn't even qualify for Medicaid because of other issues, right? Other
Mhm.
assets or whatever. So,
Right, exactly. So they're
that's
just worried because they don't want to have to pay that back, but they're not sure that they're going to hit that, that amount. So,
and I guess my default would be is if there was really question, I'd I'd let the healthcare.gov application determine what is right. I mean, they've got to
okay.
put in a number, and I think we'd be as honest as we can with the number that they put in from an income perspective and let the cards fall where they may. If they're declined for Medicaid at that point, like if they go to try to go to Medicaid and they don't get it and they come back and need to enroll in an ACA plan, like to me, that's just additional documentation that they shouldn't have been in Medicaid, right? So,
Right.
but I think on any of these situations, we just need to be as truthful and honest on the ACA application as we can, and then look at the eligibility notice or summary at the end and do whatever that tells us because that's a government determination on what that person qualifies for in that moment.
Thank you.
Yes. Kemp said, comment if your subsidy is low, then you might want off exchange anyway because of better coverage. That's correct. 100%. Yeah, if you're not getting much subsidy or any subsidy, then off exchange can make. But I would say that the risk you're running in those situations by going off exchange is that if their income were to drop throughout the year, they can't go back and reclaim subsidies if they're off exchange. So that would be the only downside to that. Maggie, off exchange plans, there are HSA, any bronze plan or catastrophic plan is HSA approved, whether it's on exchange or off exchange. That was part of the one big beautiful bill that any bronze plan or catastrophic plan on or off exchange is HSA approved starting in 2026. So it definitely broadened out the ability to leverage a health savings account. And then there are a few silver plans that I've seen. Usually the silver plans have to have HSA in the name, I think, to be that'll designate which silver plans might be HSA approved. There's not a ton in the markets that I've looked at so far, but I did see a couple of silver HSA plans. So that's something to keep an eye on too. All right. So with the 10 or 12 minutes that we have left, and we might go a little deeper into this next week, but I think we need to talk through what are these creative alternatives if somebody just simply cannot afford an ACA plan, and where should we be pivoting to? And I put out some trainings and things. I sent out an email yesterday, specifically about the Health Protector Guard and the Med Mutual Protect product. But as I look at this, to me, there are three creative alternatives. Like there's short-term insurance, there's the Health Protector Guard product with Golden Rule, and there's the Med Mutual Protect product, which is a specified disease and a major accident policy. None of these are perfect because they all have gaps and holes and things that they don't cover or problems getting into them. Let's start with short term, just very high level. If you're in the state of Michigan, short term is not a great solution because you can only buy it for 6 months at a time. And you have to qualify to get into it. So the problem with short term in the state of Michigan is that if you sell them a short term for a January 1st effective date, it goes for 6 months. But when it ends in 6 months, they're not in an open enrollment season. And so if they're sick, if they're healthy, it's no big deal. They can just buy another one to bridge through the second half of the year, right? But if they're sick in July, when that short-term plan ends, they're screwed because they can't buy an ACA plan that covers pre-existing conditions, and they can't qualify for a new short-term plan to bridge them through to the end of the year. And they can't qualify for a Health Protector Guard if they're sick, and they can't qualify for a Med Mutual Protect if they're sick. So in the state of Michigan, stacking short-term plans, I think, is a very dangerous proposition. I feel like it's a little bit of a house of cards. If I was going to sell someone a short-term plan, I would also be selling a Health Protector Guard or a Med Mutual Protect along with it to give them coverage if they need it through the end of the year, something through the end of the year. In the state of Indiana, we have the ability to sell 12-month and 36-month short-term plans. So a short-term plan can be a viable option to bridge somebody through the next 12 months or potentially the next 36 months. Allstate and United Health One are the two main carriers on that. I've sent out some information in the past week or so about the differences between them. Allstate's going to be cheaper. The main reason for that is because it doesn't cover drugs very well. Like if they get put on an expensive medication, there's kind of a hole in the drug coverage. United Health One is going to be more expensive, but the big reason for that is because any drug costs that they have are going towards their deductible and out-of-pocket maximum on most of those plans. So that's one of the reasons it's going to be a lot more expensive. So those are good viable options as kind of a core medical plan. If I was selling a short-term plan, I would typically push to the highest deductible and just use that as the base catastrophic coverage and then tuck a Health Protector Guard underneath it. So the Health Protector Guard can help them pay for little things like if they end up in the hospital, it'll pay the consumer money to pay, for each day that they're in the hospital, each day they're in intensive care, ambulance, doctor's visits, tests, therapy, and more. So I'd kind of use the short-term plan in the state of Indiana with a high deductible as the main catastrophic coverage. And then I'd take maybe a $2,000 Health Protector Guard and tuck it under there to give them coverage on the little stuff. If that's too expensive, then I think the drop down would be to go to the Med Mutual Protect. Both Indiana and Michigan have the Med Mutual Protect product. I think it's a great product for what it is. Basically what it is it's a specified disease and a major accident policy. And it's two separate policies that you can purchase together. What it does is on major illnesses, it gives you a $5,000 deductible and $1 million of coverage. And then separate from that, on major accidents, gives you a $5,000 deductible and $1 million of coverage. Now, it doesn't cover little things like a doctor's office visit or a test that leads to nothing or expensive medications. I mean, there are certain things that it's not going to cover, but it is a good catastrophic policy and a hell of a lot better than somebody going with no coverage at all. Again, with that Health Protector Guard, I think you can use that as like your base catastrophic coverage. And then, with the Med Mutual Protect, you can use that as your base catastrophic coverage, similar to a short-term plan. And you can tuck a Health Protector Guard underneath it to cover the little stuff. So I kind of think about it, that's the progression. I think ACA, if somebody can get into an ACA plan, that's probably where we need to be. If they're not able or willing to pay the premium for an ACA plan, then we're probably going to short-term in Indiana and then to Med Mutual Protect. In Michigan, I'm probably just going straight to Med Mutual Protect and then tucking Health Protector Guards under all of those to cover the little things. Obviously, a critical guard critical illness or cancer policy makes sense alongside that. An accident-wise makes sense alongside that. A dental-wise max for vision and dental makes sense alongside that. So it just kind of depends on how how you build it and what they want. But I think whether it's short term or a Med Mutual Protect or a Health Protector Guard, they've got to be healthy to get all three of those products, right? So if somebody's sick or has major pre-existing conditions, their only option is an ACA plan or Medicaid if they're low income, right? Those are the only places they can go and get guaranteed acceptance and pre-existing conditions covered. If you look at the short term, the Health Protector Guard or the Med Mutual Protect, all three of those products have underwriting. So when we talk about underwriting, there's a few things to think about with that. Number one, they have to answer medical questions on all of those plans to be able to get into the plan. So there's certain things that would be absolute knockout questions where they're just a decline on all three products. I mean, a heart attack in recent history, probably a heart attack ever. I think, somebody having cancer in recent history, strokes, hospitalizations, major surgeries that aren't resolved. I mean, all those things could easily be knockout questions on all those policies. Those policies also have height weight charts that you need to be aware of. I looked at them with some of my staff members yesterday, and short term is probably the least forgiving when it comes to height weight charts. The Health Protector Guard is a little more forgiving, and the Med Mutual Protect. I think we were looking at a guy who was 6 foot. I think to get the short term, he had to be under 278 pounds. To get the Health Protector Guard, I think he had to be under 292 pounds. And to get the Med Mutual Protect, he had to be under 313 pounds. So I felt like the Med Mutual Protect had a little bit broader acceptance on, people who are heavier. But that height weight chart is not like negotiable, or it's not like, oh, I mean, if they're outside the height weight chart, it's a decline in all three products. But each product has a different height weight chart. On the Med Mutual Protect, there's a whole list of specific conditions that are knockout conditions. And so you got to read through those and just make sure they don't have any of those conditions. I think all of these creative alternatives are better plays for people who don't have a significant health history, right? The other thing that you'll see on, I think, most all of these plans is that most of them are going to have, if they approve you, so let's say you have pre-existing conditions, but they aren't big enough pre-existing conditions to prevent you from getting the coverage. So they may accept you, but they're going to implement a pre-existing condition clause. Some of them are 6 months, some of them are 12 months, but it's a 6 or 12-month look back, and anything they've been treated for in that period of time, it's considered a pre-existing condition and not covered. That's probably the most basic definition. There's some nuance and variances by state and by carrier, but for the most part, anything that's an underwritten plan, they're not going to cover pre-existing conditions even if they agree to accept you onto the plan. They're agreeing to accept you onto a short-term plan or a Health Protector Guard plan or a Med Mutual Protect plan to cover future events that might come up, not cover things that were in your past, right? So you got to think that through a little bit too. If somebody is eligible for a government subsidy almost at any level and they have pre-existing conditions, they don't have too many options other than going to the ACA, going to an ACA plan. If they simply can't afford it, the only other fallback position would be to just build a hodgepodge of guaranteed issue products for them. Maybe a guaranteed issue critical illness plan, a guaranteed issue hospitalization plan, an accident wise, and a vision dental. Like that is not going to be anything close to comprehensive coverage. But again, if that's all they can afford and all they can qualify for, something is better than nothing. So the nice thing about having a broad portfolio is we have places to go to and like fallback positions to fall into no matter what the client's situation is. But I think you've got to be well versed in these products. You got to read the product brochures. I'd encourage you go to Quote Connect is going to have the product brochures for every product that's in Quote Connect in it. So all of your ACA products, there's a product brochure in Quote Connect. All of your short-term plans, except for Allstate. So all of your UHC short-term plans. I don't think priority's in there either, but some of the carriers you have to go directly to the carrier website. I'd say specifically the Health Protector Guard is in Quote Connect. But if you want to look at Allstate, short-term priority health in Michigan, 6-month priority health in Michigan, or Med Mutual Protect, you've got to go direct to the carriers on those. Those are, for a number of reasons, aren't loaded into Quote Connect yet. So I'm going to send out some additional brochures and documents. I did send you guys out yesterday um, some additional trainings, and it was entitled Selling GRIC, Health Protector Guard, and Med Mutual Protect products. I included the HPDG product brochure on that, and then 3 trainings or videos that you can review that kind of help put a little more context around what I've talked about today. So, all right, we're getting close to the top of the hour.
Yeah,
So
I think
Justin,
you covered all it.
I don't think what Allstate's going to be in Quote Connect. Not right now. Not before the end of the year.
No, I think
Unfortunately.
you got all the other questions.
Cool. Is there anything else you guys need to have answered so that you can have a great rest of the week before we jump off? And I don't know when Congress is going to go back to work and fix this, but
No crystal ball.
no crystal ball. But if you got any contacts in Washington, D.C. or can apply any pressure, do it. Do it.
I don't anymore.
Yeah, I don't think, there's very little people that do anymore. So, all right. Well, hey, I appreciate y'all joining us today. Next week, we'll continue this conversation. I'd say bring questions if you've got them. I just want to try to keep you guys up to speed on I think this is more complex this year than it's been in the past. I'd count on a little more time with each client that you have because you have multiple things you've got to kind of work through as far as where they need to land. Um, we've got a great portfolio, so do the best you can with what you've got. I think that's definitely a lesson to take with you.
One day at a time, one client at a time.
Yep. And they appreciate our help more than ever. So
Yep.
keep that in mind. All right, everybody. I hope you have a great week. Thanks for jumping in today. Feel free to reach out to your leadership team if you have questions or anything. See ya.